Let's talk about politics, but not the usual crap that you will see in the mainstream news or some of the YouTubers out there. Let's talk about the fundamental problems that we've got as a country, not just immigration and our NHS system. Let's talk about globally how the systems are changing and where do we fit within that and why we've ended up where we've ended up. Okay, and this is not about blaming the Tories or blaming Labour or the far right or the far left. These are actual challenges that we have got. Okay, and some of those challenges literally cannot be dealt with by one government. Okay, and these are historical challenges, and these have been coming for the last 20 or 30 years. So we're going to talk about the challenges that we've got. We're going to talk about the Brexit. We're going to talk about the needs, what's happened after Brexit, some of the challenges that we've got in regards to trade deals, how they affect us long term as an economy, because ultimately those things matter more than one government making a decision of putting 1.5 pence up on your tax, or whether inheritance tax will change a little bit, whether capital gains tax will change a little bit, whether the NHS is going to get an extra £1 billion. Those things, and I know they're all big things and important things, don't mean crap compared to some of the big challenges that we've got within the global world. So let's talk about it. As always, but especially on this one, because it's all my opinion and it's all me, and I could be wrong about a lot of this stuff, and I'm sure I am wrong about a lot of this stuff, but what I want to do is get your opinion, because I want you guys to let me know and educate me, just like I'm giving you my views and I'm taking advantage of this channel. Although it's a mortgage channel, this time I've waited for all the political stuff and all the YouTubers and all the mainstream news people to do their videos and get over with the election. Now the election is done, let's talk about the real challenges that are out there that's not being discussed. So let's get down to it. We've had the election come and go, and there have been many arguments made, fundamentally arguments around the economy and immigration and the change of, essentially the change of the Great United Kingdom in terms of how it's doing, where we are, where do we sit within the global infrastructure, whether it's foreign policy, whether it's investments in the UK, and really long term, where are we going to be? Okay, so is Labour going to affect fundamental change? In my opinion, definitely not, but I don't think Conservatives would have, I don't think Reform would have, and I don't think any left party would have. And unless we discuss this topic, none of those are going to make a difference, okay? And I'll tell you why. So, in the last 30 odd years, we've seen a dramatic change in the way the world works, okay? One of the things that Great Britain was a leader in was it was an outward economy, okay? It had the empire, and when the empire sort of retreated, Great Britain, although it did not directly rule a lot of those countries, it still had the systems and infrastructures in place to make it more competitive for those countries to trade, and not so much trade as in trade goods, but also invest into the hub, which is United Kingdom. So what you had was, you had those countries that you did not directly rule over, but they were still buying arms, okay? So they were still buying arms. You still had political influence. You still had your corporations in there. You still had their money. So whatever money they had, it was being invested in the City of London, okay? You still had the legal infrastructure, and a lot of the legal frameworks of those countries are actually still swayed and shaped by Great Britain, okay? You've got countries in the Middle East as well as the Africa countries and further away. They're fundamentally linked to United Kingdom. Now, as the global economy has got bigger and bigger, those links have loosened, okay? They've started trading with countries a little bit more closer to them. Maybe they've become more unstable from a political perspective. So those links, although they're there, other entities and countries are taking chunks out of these countries, okay, and those links are getting more harder to keep. So one of the points around Brexit was, look, we've got this Commonwealth, we've got this outward going global reach, where a lot of those countries in Europe don't necessarily have. Why should we conform to what the Germans and the French want when we have got this thing outside. We've got generations of investment in these countries and we should be taking advantage of it. Okay, so putting aside the legitimate agreements in regards to, immigrations, the change of demographics, taking controls of its own borders, foreign policy, pretty much everyone's the same in terms of foreign policy. So it's all those things. And the arguments that were had were fundamentally from the immigration perspective of, our own control, our own politics, our own borders. Well, we've just seen how democratic our own politics are. We've had a party that's voted, 4 million people have voted for it and they've got 5 MPs. So that shows how democratic we are. But, it's probably still, at least it's our system and it's a system that we've had for generations. So you've got the guys that were on the right in terms of wanting Brexit. They essentially, their argument is now, look, those things that we wanted are still the aim. The clowns in charge just didn't do a good job. Okay, so that's fundamentally their argument. So they're saying, look, everything that we said could have come true, but these guys just couldn't execute it properly. Okay, then you got the other guys on the other side are saying, look, we've just cut our necks off, really. We've just cut our hands off dealing with our biggest trading partner. We've put barriers there. You said it was going to be cheap. It's not cheaper. You said it was going to be easy. It's not easier. Our small businesses are finding it hard, and price of goods have gone up. And now some of that's to do with just the way the inflation has happened, but some of that has got a direct impact on Brexit. Okay, so you've got two sets of arguments there, right? To answer those arguments, let's look at the challenges that we have got, no matter which route we go down. Okay, let's look at the challenges. For example, the first thing is, let's look at the challenges now. Okay, so we have had Brexit. I don't think we're going to go back in. So let's look at where we stand now and some of the problems that we've got that are not being discussed. Everybody's talking about the internal issues of around, such and such Labour MP or Conservative MP saying this and saying that, and the small boats and that. But let's look at the bigger picture, right? So Brexit has left us in a place whereby we didn't really execute it properly. We didn't have those trade routes lined up to take the slack, to take all of that trade that we were doing with Europe, okay? Because Brexit, and what should have been really explained to people is Brexit was really a long-term aspiration project, okay? Just like it's taken 25, 30, 40 years for us to couple with Europe, it's going to take that long for us to decouple away from it, okay? So it means short-term, it was going to be immense pain, okay? And it has been for us, and we are, as a country, we're not better off right now for it, okay? But it's a long-term project. And unfortunately, with the election cycles that we've got, with the 24-hour news, that hasn't been explained. That wasn't explained to people because it would have frightened one generation to say, look, by the time we really get it right, you're 25 now, you'll probably be 50 years. You might not be able to afford the property. Your business might go under. You might be made redundant a couple of times. But however, this is our goal. Okay, this is where we want to be in the long term. And I don't believe, because if they went and told those people, those 20-year-olds, 30-year-olds, 40-year-olds, 50, 60-year-olds, the 70-year-olds probably not going to be around, but they would have said, no way, we want our standard of living to get better. You told us everything's going to get better, rather than, no, it will eventually get better, but it might skip a generation. And I don't think that was explained. So we decoupled, and now we need a friend, okay? So let's look at some of our potential friends out there and see what the challenges are with those. So the biggest partner that we've got, we're going to leave that to the end, which is America, okay? And doing trade deals with America. But let's look towards the east, okay? The Far East is being swallowed up by China. So we've even got some of the footholds that we've got within there, like Singapore, Hong Kong and so forth. They've been swallowed up or given back. Okay, so we've got a bit of a challenge out there to be able to compete with China. We just cannot compete with China. We can't get our goods over there anyway. Our manufacturing base is not that type of manufacturing base, so we're not going to compete with China over there. So we have to concede ground to those countries up there. And although we can do some trade, obviously, but I'm talking about major trade. So then you move towards the Indias and so forth. And of course, you've got great links between India, but India is growing itself. It's outgrowing the economy. And India is now taking a more independent political stance, whether it's to do with foreign policy, whether it's to do with investments, those arms sales that used to be sold to India and so forth. India's historically always been buying arms from Russia anyway, but India's been courted by the Americans a lot more. Americans can offer India a lot better things, and a lot of those countries around there we are losing out because we're not being as competitive. So we'll put that aside. Then we'll look to Africa. A lot of those colonized countries, a lot of those Commonwealth countries sit in the African continent. And again, we've had great links with the governments there, or structures, or corporations and so forth. But there is a big battle going on with Africa. China is coming in and can look at things for the next 25, 30, 40 years. Precisely the time frame that we are going to be in trouble, and we are looking to decouple from Europe, and we're trying to find a new role for ourselves. We cannot compete with China for long-term investment goals. One, a lot of those countries in Africa are underinvested, so you need to pour a lot of money into that, right? And we just don't have that money. We cannot go and borrow that type of money, okay? We've got a huge debt ceiling and debt level, and we cannot fund the development of those countries, so then we can reap the rewards later on in life. However, China can. And the China's will go around and say, look, we'll build you an airport, we'll build you roads, we'll build you a train station, we'll build this, we'll have Chinese people in there, just sign away a 99-year lease with a contract with us. Just sign away this. So China's very much looking at a long-term Belt and Road project, and we are being out-competed. And also, China doesn't care about who they're dealing with, okay? If you're a dictator, crack on. We don't care how you're going to deal with those people. And Great Britain, for wrongly or rightly, it's been accused that Britain does the same thing, but just more underhanded. But there's no doubt we just cannot compete with the infrastructure projects that the Chinese are funding. Okay, so then it leaves you with a number of other countries that are simply not going to align themselves with a Western country, because they're either dictatorships or they want security. And Great Britain, with its lack of investment in its military right now, simply cannot, help securitize some of those countries. So it can't. So they're turning to the Russians. And also, we've seen the West turn its back on some of the dictatorships and some of the countries that they did back, and they walked away from it and left them crumbling, and some of the deals that they did behind the scene. So the Russians have come to their fort. So if you want trade and investments, China. If you want security and military boot and, dictatorships and, that sort of stuff, Russia. Then you got the Americans looking at China, looking at Africa and going, well, hang on a minute, China's taken over and we're not happy with the Russians being in there. Let's invest. So the Americans have come late to the picture, but they've started investing in Africa. So all of a sudden, Great Britain has been sort of squeezed out in various things. If you want to deal with a Western power, if you want to have the security of dealing with big corporations, you go over America, because the Americans have got the biggest corporations, they've got a much bigger economy, and they've got the military might to back up some of those deals. Okay, so Great Britain's been squeezed out. Yes, they can do some deals together, and there's been co-dealing between the British and the French and the Americans with some of those countries, but it's not enough. It's not enough, okay? And you've also got some of those countries that were, we were selling a lot of arms to. The arms markets become a lot more competitive. Some of those countries in the Middle East, with the Britain used to sell a lot of arms to, they're now buying off Turkey. They're now buying off other countries. They're buying off China. So, and the Russians are still trying to flood the market, although they're under sanctions. So Africa's a bit of an issue. So we've already talked about Europe. We talked about Far East. We talked about Africa. What about our best friends? What about the Americans? Now, there's no doubt that we are linked to America, whether it's financially, whether it's politically. America is the best fit for us. Okay, there's no doubt about it. They're the biggest investors in the UK. We're one of the biggest investors in America. Okay, but the Americans know that we want a deal. Why was the deal not done now? Why hasn't the deal been done so many years after Brexit? And it's because the Americans are saying, yeah, we know you want to deal with us. However, these are our conditions. And those conditions are an issue, okay? Because it essentially means the Americans are going to come over and they're going to put various rules in place. What's going to happen to your national health? Oh, we've got big corporations waiting to get in there, okay? And that's going to be a potential disaster for whoever that votes for that. What's going to happen to your arms industry? Well, there's going to be a lot more coupling down with the American industry. What's going to happen to your banking sector? Well, a lot of that's going to pack up and move to New York. So there are fundamental problems with the American link-up. Although it's the best fit, the Americans are going to they're going to be the big partners and they're going to call the shots. And longer term, remember, our goal for Brexit and our goal for our economy was a long-term approach of, yes, it's going to be painful decoupling from Europe, but in the next 20, 30 years, we're going to be okay. We do a deal with America, all their corporations are going to come and take over. And what we have got of our financial services and some of our industries that we have got, I think will be overrun by the American corporations and the might of America, essentially. And also, America's fundamental concentration has actually been done on NAFTA, and its biggest partners, which are right next to it, Canada on one side from an energy perspective, as well as Mexico from a trade perspective, especially as America is trying to decouple itself from China. So a lot of those jobs, manufacturing, so forth, are ending up in Mexico and are going to end up probably in the safer countries in South America. Now, of course, Britain hasn't had a great presence in South America, not as much as it had in Africa and the Far East and the Middle East. So the Americans are saying, yep, you have to do this. By the way, you now need to invest in Mexico. By the way, we want you to do this. Our interest is there. So it's causing problems, nervousness. How do you give all of that away? Okay, quietly. Okay, and I think ultimately that's what's going to happen. Okay, I don't think we have got a route out of this because we're not close enough to deal with China and the Far East. We're not close enough to deal with Africa, and we've got the challenges that I've mentioned. Europe is going to be, and we'll talk about Europe, but I think the American route, unfortunately, it's probably going to be the route that we will be forced to go down to. Okay, and it's interesting, and there's nothing in regards to foreign policy. Every single decision made in America is being shadowed by the UK government. Okay, so there's no daylight between us in a foreign policy perspective. Our corporations are now interlinked so much, so much so, in all honesty, I wait for the Fed to discuss the interest rates rather than the Bank of England, because I think the Fed has more say probably than the Bank of England does in our setting of our interest rates. And that's my own opinion. So where are the advantages? Okay, so that's all doom and gloom. Okay, I've spent 20 minutes talking about the doom and gloom, but the challenges, and you can agree or disagree with me. So what are the advantages right now? Well, the advantage is Europe is going through the same thing. They're just a few years behind. Okay, Europe is still going. They've got the same challenges now around immigration, changing demographics, age. Just like Britain, Europe is going through a phenomenon whereby there's just too many old people around. So how do you tackle old people where you still need to have the social services and you still have to have the infrastructure in place to deal with the elderly, where the tax coffers are not coming in? So what they've done is they've opened the doors to immigration, hoping immigrations and it's going to solve that issue. But of course, when you open up the floodgates there, as Germany has, as some of the other countries have, that has its own challenges because the demographics of those host nations are changing, and they're changing too quickly, and that's making people very, very nervous. And that's what we've seen. We saw that with Brexit here, and we're going to see that right the way through all Western economies. Okay, all Western. I mean, you look at some of the, the Swedens, and the amount of refugees that they took on, or people from foreign countries they took on. That's now having an effect on a very liberal, what I would say, centre government. And they're seeing challenges. And I think that's just going to continue, okay? It will continue as there's a need to fund all these social policies that these democratic countries have got, and the coffers are getting dry, especially as those countries that had historical roots to, like France with Algeria and all these other countries, the colonizers out there, those sort of colonized countries become more independent and sway away maybe to people like China and other countries. So we've got a big problem, but so have the Europeans, okay? And what we've seen is the liberal left sort of European market in that sector. They're going to change, and they're going to become increasingly more right-wing, increasingly more patriotic, increasingly more isolationist, and that will have its advantages for Great Britain, okay? Because we will be a few years down the line. And as they will, it will start with the immigrants and it will start with that. But then Europe, I believe, because it's inherently too divided from the rich countries to the poor countries, they're going to start infighting amongst themselves. And we've already seen that from, what's happening in Hungary, and Hungary's opening up its own dialogue with other countries. And they're all going to start infighting, okay? And I think there's an opportunity there. If Britain can get its act together, yes, probably has to do a deal with and swallow its pride with the Americans, but there's a big opportunity out there to be able to do better deals with those independent, more right-wing leaning, more isolationist countries in Europe. And I think that's where, if Britain is a few years ahead, they're going to be going through absolute turmoil. Now, we have got a challenge, because we're going to go through turmoil, because I believe these problems that the Labour government's got, they're not going to get better, and they definitely don't have the solutions for it. None of those governments have. None of those manifestos will be able to deal with the historical, what I've just explained, the global issues that we've got. Not necessarily about, whether, the school roof is going to get fixed. Those things come afterwards. They are challenges, but the cause of our challenge, that's not going to be resolved within 4 years. It's not going to resolve within 10 years. I'm telling you, it's going to be resolved in the next 20, 25, 30 years. So unless you have got and this is what I want to get your opinion on, unless we've got a civil service that's independent, it's almost like a shadowy government. Now, I'm not talking about conspiracies, but unless you've got a shadowy government or shadowy infrastructure that that could work and plan long term, we're screwed. Because you're going to get the populists come in, you're going to get the people that can communicate very clearly and scapegoat some of those small reasons for our problems. But the bigger explanation of what I've just gone through for the last 20 minutes is not going to be, people are not going to have the patience, and they're not, frankly, going to be interested to understand what's going on globally. Okay? And hopefully you guys have. But I think there's an opportunity there as Europe becomes scattered, and I think Europe's in real big trouble. Okay? The decision made by UK, and I voted Remain, by the way, but I think there is an opportunity out there with Brexit, trying to do the trade deals quickly and trying to get in there and get in bed with certain entities quickly, become stabilized, and try to explain the challenges, whoever comes into government, and essentially put in the systems and processes and the entities behind the scenes to look more longer term in the next 10, 15, 20 years, rather than be short term for the next 3-4 years, because a lot of our challenges are just not going to happen in the next 3-4 years. And try to make ourselves a hub to doing business, dealing with AI, dealing with, the good news is we've got a lot of infrastructures in place and we can take advantage of it. It just needs to be challenged in the right manner. We don't have now, we talked about all of those countries that I've talked about, they've got their own challenges. China's got huge challenges, okay? China has got an aging population itself, okay? China is not as stable as what you think. China's got a huge problem in regards to the money side of things in the economy, which has been fueled by property, which is unsustainable, and we've seen a dramatic sort of decline in how China's economy works. So, and the Belt and Road Initiative has lost a lot of money. So although they've got a lot of money and they've put a lot of money into it, there have been projects which has just been unsustainable. So I think China's going to slow down with their investments, and that could be potential opportunities that we can go in there and sweep up. So those things are important. I think Africa is going to have challenges as China starts being more picky around projects. I don't think the Americans are really interested in Africa too much, and I think they will. They're just doing that to try to combat some of the Chinese influence and the Russian influences. But I think there's going to be enough scope in Africa for us to get involved and take some of that initial stuff that the Americans are taking over, and some of the Chinese slack, and some of the Russians as the Russians retreat, because Russian economy is going to get smaller. I know they've been doing quite well, but I think if it's going to be sustained pressure, they would just not be able to keep on. So and as China starts swallowing Russia up from the east, in terms of some of those Caucasus countries, as the Kazakhstans and all of those countries, they're going to be under pressure to move away from Russia and get in bed with China. So we have got some opportunities here. Globally, politically, there are some really good opportunities for Great Britain to make its mark again. We have to get on with the trade deals quickly. We have to secure some of those challenges that we've got. The immigration thing has to be dealt with in a quick manner. We have to almost see that, because you can't explain this stuff. People just don't have the patience to deal with all of this stuff outside. What they will see is what the immigration numbers, okay? Does that mean the government's doing a good job? Unfortunately, we've dumbed down politics so much that there are certain markers, okay? The certain markers is, can I see my GP? What's my operations in terms of the NHS? What's happening with my mortgage rates and council taxes and bills? And also, what's going on with this immigration? As they've made the immigration a big deal, which it is a big deal, let's tackle those. Those three things need to be tackled, but the long-term goals are essentially not those three things, because these things are just the cause of the bigger problem, and the bigger problem is what I've explained. Anyway, very long video. Let me know what you guys think. I would be delighted if you can write some comments there for me. If you have stuck around, what should we put a word in there for people that have stuck around this far? Let me just put stuck around, okay, and then leave your comment, okay? It'll be interesting to see who has actually listened to all of this. Like I said, it's a little bit of a different video. I'll be grateful if you can make some comments, make some suggestions on my theories, what you guys think are biggest problems going forward, and how we can resolve the challenges together. Take care, and I'll catch you on the next one. The content of this video does not constitute giving advice. It's purely for information purposes. All cases should be discussed with a professional mortgage broker. As a mortgage is secured against your home or property, it could be repossessed if you do not keep up mortgage payments. Niche advice is authorized and regulated by the Financial Conduct Authority.